Hi, I'm Andrew from Parlogram Auctions. And the best thing about making videos on YouTube is reading the comments viewers leave in the videos, where they share their stories and memories of the Beatles' music and records. I do read them all and do my best to respond where I can, but sometimes there are questions where I can't answer in a few short sentences. So I thought I'd make a proper video to make sure I can answer the questions in a more accurate and efficient way for everyone. Now, the questions in this video all come from channel members. So if you'd like to find out more about that, just click on the join button, which is next to the subscribe button beneath the video. Now we've got 11 questions in this first session to get through, so let's get going. The first question comes from Steve Bailey, who asks, have you ever come across or own a publication that explores all the printing errors on labels and sleeves of the Beatles' UK and worldwide vinyl, from the start up to the present day? Well, the short answer to that is no. I actually don't think it's possible to create a single publication which deals with every known variation in the UK, let alone the world. But that's not to say there aren't any of note dealing with this subject. Well, first up is this 2014 book about the UK records called Beatles for Sale on Parlophone Records by Bruce Spicer and Frank Daniels, which also includes contributions from yours truly, and it's a decent place to start. It does a great job of covering all the Beatles' UK releases on 45, EP and LP, which includes most of the label variations on both Parlophone and Apple. But as new variations are being discovered all the time, it's not 100% complete, but it's well put together and worth reading if you're a collector of UK pressings. Another set of books I highly recommend are these, by Dutch author and collector Azin Maltmaker. He's written separate volumes for every album, each one packed with incredible detail about every aspect of it, the sessions, songs, bootlegs, and virtually every fact and figure you need. The only problem with them is that each volume was limited to 5,000 copies each, and they're not easy to find, although they do turn up from time to time on eBay. And that brings me on nicely to the next question, and it's from Jason Mackay. And he says, I'm currently working on a database of first pressing Beatles and solo releases, in all formats and including chart performances for every country in the world. I'm not joking. Do you think there will be a market for this if I decided to turn them into books eventually? Or do you think it's already done? Also, do you know of any good websites or books which may help me? Well, Jason, that's a worthy, if huge, undertaking, and it would be incredible if you could pull it off. As far as research goes, there are a lot of websites dedicated to certain countries, and I'll put some links to those in the description. Of course, the market for such books is very limited, so don't expect to get rich on the back of them, but I think myself and Steve Bailey would be your first customers. Okay, so the next question comes from Japanese member Mitsuru Hanagata, who says, I believe New Zealand pressing records are great in sound quality. I would like to hear your opinion. Well, I think Beatles records from New Zealand sound great. They, like Australian records, were pressed directly from UK stampers or high-quality tapes from Abbey Road. Beatles albums released in New Zealand were mastered and cut at HMV in Wellington on UK-supplied equipment which was calibrated and maintained by EMI's engineers to the same specifications of those at Abbey Road. But unlike in the UK, where the cutting engineers were briefed to cut as loud as possible, the engineers in New Zealand were not as heavy-handed with their EQ and compression. So although they're a little quieter than the UK pressings, they tend to have a bit more dynamic range to them. It's the same story with the Australian pressings, which are also well worth hunting down. And those early 70s pressings are especially good. The only exception with that catalogue is Magical Mystery Tour, which used a poor quality dub from Capitol. Okay, now on to question 4. And DT asks, for UK releases, it seems there are so many different subtle variations for the yellow and black Parlophone labels. Is there a way to distinguish from first pressings to later pressings? Well, yes there is. The paper used for printing the labels changed over the years. For example, labels for Please Please Me with the Beatles and A Hard Day's Night all had a semi-gloss eggshell-like finish to them. All after that had a more flat matte finish. The best way to determine pressing dates from the labels are from the fonts and layouts, as there were frequent but subtle changes from year to year. For example, any label which includes the Sold in UK text will date from between March 1963 to May 1969. Bruce Spizer's book goes into a lot of detail about those variations, but it's a big area, and I could make a whole month's worth of videos about it and still not cover them all. Okay, and on to question number 5. Aubrey Jacobs asked me a question I've been asked many times. What are your thoughts on the recent Giles Martin remixes of the Beatles albums? Is it worth buying the vinyl releases? Well, I think the vinyl remixes were a great idea, and the sets were very well put together, but I'm not a fan of the sound of the remixes overall. Like you, I guess, I was curious about the sound of the remixes, but the main reason I bought these sets were for the outtakes and the extra material. But having heard them all, I think the quality of Giles's remixes is improving. I think the Let It Be remix is much better and more mature than the Sgt. Pepper one. The White Album wasn't bad either, but I didn't think Abbey Road needed one in the first place. But I hope they continue as they breathe new life into each album and, more importantly, attract a new and younger audience to the Beatles' music, which is a good thing. So long may that continue. And if you don't like the remixes, you've still got the original records to listen to. It's just another option in your collection. Let's hope that the next one is the best one yet, whatever that may be. Okay, on to question number 6. And Gia Skegstad, I hope I've said that correctly, says, I would like to know more about the 90s pressings of Beatles singles. They came with silver Parlophone labels. I recently bought the Twist and Shout EP, also with silver label. So which were released, and any info please? Well, I think these are the type of discs that Gia is referring to, all of which were pressed in the late 80s and early 1990s. EMI began experimenting with paperless labels as far back as 1964, and were at the time trialled by their sister company Pathé in France. The manufacture of these discs involved the labels being etched directly onto the metalwork and inked at the press on these SP130 presses, which were direct injection molding machines which used recycled, discarded trimmings from 12-inch records. The process of inking at the press saved EMI money, but at the expense of quality, as anyone who's ever had one of these pressings will tell you. EMI pressed all of the Beatles 45s and EPs using this process, and they turned out to be the final vinyl pressings of these formats. They weren't big sellers and are not easy to find, and fetch around £50 or $60 each today. Okay, and on to question number 7, and it's about Sgt. Pepper. Julian Dobler would like to know if there's a reason behind the fact that some editions come with a locked groove at the end and some don't, and is there any easy way to distinguish this? Well, Julian, all UK pressings come with a locked groove, as did most other pressings from other countries, but there's no visual indicator to say if a pressing has it or not. One which doesn't is this 1967 German pressing on the white, red and gold Odeon label. But oddly, all other German pressings include it. But that was the exception to the rule, as most original pressings around the world included it. It's more likely to be missing from later pressings or reissues, such as the one in the MFSL box set. But what pressings are most likely to be missing is the 15 kHz tone which comes just before it, as this was added at the cutting stage and wasn't on the tape. In fact, there's a note written on the original UK master tape box about this, which reads C. H. Moss, which was cutting engineer Harry Moss for this. Okay, question number 8. Luke Lovinetti says, I would love to hear about your Beatles collection, beyond records if it exists. Do you collect Beatles memorabilia, autographs or personal belongings? Well, Luke, I'm pretty much a vinyl-only guy, and although I've been fortunate enough to handle some very rare memorabilia and personal items over the years, I've got nothing like that in my collection today. I used to have some autographs, but there are so many fakes out there, it's easy to make an expensive mistake. And getting them authenticated is a frustrating experience, as that process relies on the opinions of just a handful of people. Vinyl is more honest, and I just love it more. Number 9. Robert Gastreich says, my question is, of all the Beatles albums, which are the best pressings? Is it Capitol, EMI, Apple, Germany, Australia, or some other company or country? Also, what do you think of the compact disc for sound quality and pressing? Good question, Robert. Generally speaking, I'd say the best sounding pressings are the European ones, the UK in particular. As the UK records were pressed from first generation tapes, everything else is kind of secondary. The same goes for US artists' records pressed in the UK. The country where the record was recorded usually has the best sounding pressing. However, some countries press their Beatles records using UK metalwork, which are sometimes just as good as the UK discs, such as Australia and South Africa, for example. But it's also a matter of personal taste. The Japanese pressings, for example, were pressed on superb quality vinyl, but I find the sound a little bass shy for my taste. Some of the German pressings are great, like their Magical Mystery Tour, but there are some rough ones in there too, and those early 1980s DMM pressings have a sound all of their own. We all know what Capitol did to their tapes, and they're definitely not the ones to go for if you're looking for audiophile quality pressings. When it comes to CDs, I think the 2009 monos are unbeatable. It's a little more complicated with the stereos, but generally I like some of the later 1987 discs over the 2009 remasters. I go into that in a bit more detail in a video I made about the CDs, a link to which is in the description. Okay, on to question number 10. Vincent Rathbone asks, what's the most copies of a Beatles LP you've had to buy before finding the most perfect sounding pressing? Well, that's got to be the original UK mono white album. There's just so much that can and does go wrong on that pressing. It's also not a deep or loud cutting, so even the slightest surface mark can cause an issue. And those rough matte black inners didn't help either. Now, Abbey Road is another, which as you can see, I've got loads of copies of, all which look great but aren't. The main fault on these is the crackle on Come Together, and it's so hard to get a perfectly clean introduction to Here Comes the Sun. So if you've got a clean sounding one of these, cherish it. Okay, time for question number 11. Last one. Jacob K asks, did you watch the Get Back documentary? What did you think of it? Do you plan to buy the Blu-ray? Yep, I did watch it on Disney Plus and thought it was amazing. And I have actually ordered the Blu-ray, but I'm not entirely sure why. I think it's just a case of old habits die hard and that I like physical media. Whether or not it's going to be better than the 4K streaming version, I'll have to wait and see. Maybe I'll do a review of it. What do you think? Well, it's time to wrap this session up for now. I hope you enjoyed this format and apologies if I didn't get to your question this time. Let me know if you'd like me to do this regularly, and if so, feel free to send me your questions for the next one. You can do that in the comment section or by email or social media. Links for those are in the description. I'll be back next week with a regular style video, but I'm off now to lie down in the sunshine, so I'll say bye for now and thanks for watching.